Hello everyone, this is my year 2004 4Runner, which I mentioned in the last video that I was getting, and boy does it need some work. So the car itself is in phenomenal shape for the age and mileage of it, but a very common problem on these cars is the head gaskets will fail, and that's exactly what's wrong with this one. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about diagnosing this issue, and then I'm going to cover all the steps necessary for fixing it. And this video isn't specific to 4Runner owners. A lot of Tacomas have this same engine. It's the 1GR-FE V6 4.0, and a lot of FJs have it as well. So a lot of people will be able to benefit from this. It's basically the exact same. Not just the engine, like the engine bay itself is identical, pretty much identical on the 4Runner to the Tacoma. I'm not sure about the FJ, but the Tacoma is basically the exact same. So if you have a Tacoma, this will help you out a lot. And then if you have an FJ, you'll probably be able to get some help from this as well. And this video will also be helpful for anyone looking to do any smaller jobs, which I'm going to have to do to actually replace the head gasket, which might be the timing chain or changing a radiator or the valve cover gaskets or even the oil in the air filter. So this style of video is going to be a little more relaxed than the last one because it took basically doubled the time that it took to do that repair, which was changing the transmission on my Miata. So I'm going to be a little more relaxed here because I'm just trying to get this done. I just came back from a trip in Asia, which was a 600-mile bike trip. So I'm pretty exhausted. I just want to knock this out, but hopefully it will be no less informative than the last video. So first of all, how did I come to the conclusion that this is something that I'm going to have to replace? How do you know if you have a bad head gasket? On these cars, well, the first thing is that it's not a very uncommon problem with these cars. The 04 and 05 models have kind of a compromised head gasket design, and Toyota changed it in the 06 and above models. But for these cars, we're struggling with this issue. And the gasket that I'm going to replace the old ones with is actually that redesigned one, so it should be very future-proof. But it's not a very uncommon problem at all. And the first thing you'll notice is the heater core will start to make noise. And it's down here, so these two metal lines lead to it. And it'll make this sloshing noise. It's really goddamn annoying. It'll make you want to drive off a cliff every time you hear it. But basically, at idle, it's kind of a trickling sound. So you have to think there's air in the cooling system because the air, if the head gasket's leaking, the air is escaping the combustion chamber and entering the cooling system. And that could be one of the problems. Oil could mix with the coolant. Coolant could get into the combustion chamber. Air could get into the coolant. There's all sorts of issues that can arise from that. But one of them, and seems to be the most common, is that air from the combustion chamber will get into the cooling system. And those air pockets will flow through those lines. And so you hear the trickling water because you're not supposed to have air in the cooling system. And now because of that, because of those gaps, it makes it make that noise. And when you press the gas, it almost sounds like you're flushing the toilet. It's like this aggressive, like swirling, swishing sound. And what that is when you press the gas, it increases the speed of the engine, increases the speed of the water pump, so it pumps the coolant faster. And when you are cruising, the water pump's spinning enough to fill the gaps, so it's pumping enough water to fill those lines, so you don't hear that noise anymore. But you will hear it at idle and when you first press the gas. And you might be thinking that's probably not enough evidence for someone to want to go out and do such a big job like this, which is going to take so much of their time. And that's true. And another thing you could do to test would be a leak down test, which is where you put compressed air through the engine. And then if there is air escaping into the coolant system, you'll see bubbles in the radiator. and that'll basically confirm your theory. But for me, I didn't have to do that because when I stopped the car and let it sit for a while, the coolant would flow into the combustion chamber, and then when I started it up, it would misfire, and the engine would shake and make this terrible noise, and that basically confirmed beyond a shadow of a doubt that that was my problem. So all that remains now is to fix it. First thing we're going to do is I'm just going to take this cover off. It's just these two 10mm nut things, and then I'm going to take the air box out, which I will show after this. And really the nice thing with this is I'm not going to go in any particular order. Like when you're doing a job like this, you know, you could take the radiator out first, you could take the valve covers out first instead, or you can really, like in the first stages of taking things apart, you can go in whatever order you want as long as you do all the steps eventually. So you could go in a different order than what I go in. You don't have to follow this video exactly. This is just going to show you every step that I do, but in no particular order. So it really gives you the freedom to do things your own way. So yeah, I'm gonna start by getting this off. We've got that off, and whenever I can, I just like to reinstall any nuts or bolts just so we don't have loose hardware lying around. And to get this air box off, just undo these retainers, and it'll just pull right out. And then you'll have a bolt, get the light on it, bolt right here, and a bolt right here. They're both 12mm, I believe. And then you also have this wire held in by this rubber retainer, and you can just pop that out. Now this part is going to have to come off. It connects to the throttle body right here, and then this side is the intake manifold. So you're gonna have to loosen this hose clamp, take this hose off. It also connects to the valve cover, so you can take it off down there later. Take off this connector right here for the mass airflow sensor, 10mm bolt, another 10mm bolt, and there's a small hose back here that I've already taken off, and you can just tug on it. There's no hose clamp for it or anything, at least on mine. Something I'll also do before I get too far into it is take the battery out. So it's just this tie down here with these two nuts and a nut and a bolt on either terminal. So pretty self-explanatory. Taking that out opens up a lot of space. So what I'm going to do now is remove the intake manifold, and to do that, I'm first going to remove the throttle body, which is held on by these four 10mm nuts right here, one on each corner, and this connector, and these two coolant hoses, which I'm not going to remove yet until I drain the cooling system. So I'm just going to let it dangle in place. And then the manifold itself is held on by these two 12mm nuts, one in the front and one in the very back, and then these hex bolts, which I will find out what size those are in a moment. And then there's a hose right here, which I already removed. There's a connector going to this, I guess it's an evap solenoid. There's another connector back here. Let's see, there's a bunch of brackets holding it in place. So you have one right here, 12mm, another 12mm right here, and then one on the front, which I'll remove the bottom and top bolts for this one. And coming around back here, there are two brackets. So there's one holding these two coolant hoses on, and then there's another holding this wiring harness on, and you'll see both of them. Unfortunately, the retainer for mine broke, so I don't have to deal with that. And then I'm also going to remove the bottom bolts for these, since they'll have to come out eventually. And I also forgot to mention this hose for the PCV valve will also have to come off. Now with that manifold gone, that really opens things up. Now I just kind of encourage you to start unplugging things. So you got the VVT and the cam sensors right here. I think this is an oil temp sensor right here that can get unplugged. You can unplug all the coil pack connectors, and then the fuel injectors right here, which I actually went and unplugged those on this side because it loosened up the wiring harness and helped me get the manifold out. And then I unplugged these as well. And there was actually one more plastic clip on the back right here, and this goes to a ground, which is a 10mm that you can unscrew on the back. I don't know if it's attached to the cylinder head. I'll find out in a minute or much later, but all you have to do is stick a screwdriver in the back of it and pry up on it. And there's also a bunch of these clips right here, which are kind of annoying because they kind of thread in to these studs on the valve cover. So just what I do is I'll take 2 picks on either side and trying to get a good angle here with the flashlight. And I will spread apart the 2 things that kind of grab onto that stud, and then it'll just pull right out. But if you don't want to do that, I guess you can just cut the zip tie or figure out some other workaround. And I'm also going to start taking the coil packs themselves out, and that's just going to be a 10mm bolt, and then it'll just pull right up. The last thing I do before I take a break for the day is I'm going to drain the coolant. So I have the petcock right here. The coolant's going to drain out of this little tube. And then I've got a couple of gallon jugs to catch the coolant because it's pretty fresh, new coolant. So I'm going to reuse it and then add some new stuff to top it off. But I'm going to start in the next few steps removing a lot of these coolant lines. So it'll be very helpful to have all the coolant drained out. And then obviously before you do this, take off the top radiator cap so it will allow it to drain faster. I'm now going to take off this reservoir, which is going to be 3 10mm bolts. So one right here, one down here, and then one over here. And when you take it off, it won't spill out or anything unless you turn it upside down. So this is the only place that coolant can leave the reservoir. To go about removing the radiator, now that the reservoir is off, we're going to want to remove this fan shroud first. And the first thing I've done is actually removed the fan itself. It's just kind of sitting right here. And then I threaded these nuts back in place just because this pulley is under some tension, so you don't want it to come off. But it's nice to have the belt around here when you're removing this fan, because otherwise this pulley will just spin in place since it's connected to the water pump. But to remove the shroud now, you're going to want to remove these 2 top 10mm bolts, and then it should pull up. Now with that out of the way, just so much room opens up now that we have both the fan and the shroud out, which came out together. And so now I'm going to go about removing the radiator, which is going to consist of removing this upper hose, the 2 clamps on it, the lower hose, which you can see down there, and then there are 2 transmission lines for the automatic transmission, which I'm going to remove. And you'll have to be careful with those because some transmission fluid will spill out, so be prepared to catch that. And then the radiator itself is held on by 4 bolts and nuts. So there's a nut right here, and then it's threaded through to a bolt right here. So just grab the bolt, take the nut off, do that for all 4 corners, and it should come out. With the radiator out of the way, we can start removing these accessories now that we have more than enough space to do so. And the first thing I'm going to do is remove the serpentine belt. You're going to need a 14mm socket and a wrench with preferably a lot of leverage, and you're going to turn counterclockwise to loosen that tension on the belt, and then you can just pull it back, let go, and then take the wrench off, and the belt is essentially off at this point, if I can get that wrench off. And with that belt off, the first pulley I removed is the water pump pulley, which was quite easy since I already had the fan off. And now I'm going to move to the alternator. First thing I've done to take off the alternator is I've removed these 3 brackets, which I just noticed are labeled A, B, and C. The B bracket was in the way. And then we can come over here and look at the alternator, which is a little bit more exposed now. There's a 10mm nut for the connector. There's this plastic connector which pulls out really easily, and then there's a top and a bottom 14 millimeter bolt, as well as a 10 millimeter bolt holding on this wire bracket here. So it's fairly simple, fairly easy. I actually just saw down here, now that I got the wiring harness off, that there's another bolt holding that wiring bracket on. All right, that alternator came out no problem. All you have to do once you get all the bolts loosened is just slide it out this way, and it should have enough room to come out. So now that that's out of the way, I'm gonna get to zipping off these 3 pulleys here to give us more much needed space. This one, this is not a bolt to remove this. This is just to release the tension on the serpentine belt. So we're gonna hold off on that one for now, and I will show you the correct method for removing it. Now I'm at least going to attempt to remove the crankshaft pulley. This thing has a lot of torque on this bolt, but with my impact, it should be able to get it off no problem. And with the car in park, the engine should not turn over. All right, that came out much easier than I thought it would. So here's the bolt, 22 millimeter, and here's the pulley. And if yours doesn't slide right off when you take the bolt out, there are these holes right here, and you can thread a bolt all the way through, and it'll actually press out on it and allow you to take it off. And these holes, they're the same size as the timing cover bolt, the same thread pitch as the timing cover bolts. So if you don't have these bolts on hand, you can actually just take bolts off the car, put them on here, and then use them to your advantage. So they really give you all the tools to take this off. Now to remove the power steering pump, you're going to have to remove one 14 millimeter bolt that was right here, but I removed it, and then there's one down here, and so you're going to have to you're gonna have to turn the pulley so that it lines up with the head of the bolt. Here's the power steering pump removed. You're just gonna push it off to the side. You don't have to disconnect the lines or anything. We're just getting it out of the way so that we can get the timing cover off. Now we're gonna come over here to the AC compressor, and this is held on by 4 bolts. I believe they are 12 millimeter, 1 on each corner. So you'll have to get under the car to remove it. And it's a little tight, but not totally unmanageable. And then there's one electrical connector back here. Let me see if I can get a better angle. Right there, behind those Freon lines. The last thing you're going to want to do after disconnecting that AC compressor is to disconnect this bracket right here on the line, and it's held in by this 10 millimeter bolt right here. And it's not going to move very much because it's still connected to the hard lines, but that's all right. We're just trying to disconnect it from the engine. Before we get too far in this repair, I'm going to go ahead and drain the oil, which I'm kind of surprised I haven't done yet. I guess I was just enjoying working on the top of the engine and didn't really feel like crawling under the car. But to drain it, you're just going to want to take a 14 millimeter socket and loosen the drain plug, and the oil will come out. And I already removed the fill cap to make it flow a little better. And ordinarily, I'd recommend doing this first because if you have a bad head gasket and you drive around with it for a while, you might want to first assess the quality of the oil, see if like a bunch of metal comes out from maybe coolant mixing with the oil, and see if your engine really is like too compromised to repair, or if this job is still worth doing. So in my case, I haven't been driving around with this for a very long time at all. This is a very new issue. So in tackling it as it happens, I'm not very worried about the status of the engine. The next thing I'm going to do is to remove this tensioner pulley right here. And to do that, there are about 5 bolts, I think. There's one right there, one right there, that one, there's one back in here that you cannot see, and then there is this one right here, all 14 millimeter, and then once you do that, it'll pull off this way to the side, and then you can remove it fairly easy. And those bolts are going to be pretty tight. The next thing I'm going to remove is going to be this piece right here. So you're going to want to take off this hose clamp, either this one or this one. This large one right here. So yeah, just those 3 hoses, one 10 millimeter, another 10 millimeter right here, and then there are 3, 1, 2, 3 connecting it to the water pump, and you won't have to remove this thermostat right here. Something that is essential to do before removing anything coolant related on the engine is to come over to the sides of the engine and access these coolant drain ports right here, and these will drain enough coolant out of the engine to where you won't make a huge mess if you were to take the water pump off without doing this, for example, and it'll allow you to catch that coolant and potentially reuse it. And the way to access these is this one is on the passenger side. There's also one on the driver's side. You can access it from the side right here by taking off this splash guard with these plastic clips. That's the same on the driver's side, but a little bit harder to access. And you could also access it from the front if you have enough stuff removed. I believe on the driver's side, you'll probably have to get the AC compressor removed. And then on the passenger side, you'll probably have to get the power steering pump out of the way. But once you access it, you can put a hose around that little metal bit right there, that metal line, and then coolant will flow through that, and you can catch it either in a gallon jug or a bucket or some other catching apparatus. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to put a little rubber hose around that line and funnel it all into a gallon jug and then reuse it. And the way to open these up is to get a 10 millimeter socket, put it around that hex head right there, give it a couple of turns, and then coolant will start to flow out of that metal line bit on the bottom. Almost ready to take the timing cover off, but I've gone and taken the water pump off just to give a better view of all the bolts that attach to it. It's a mixture of 10 and 12 millimeter bolts. The 10s are threaded into the timing cover itself. The 12 millimeter bolts go through to the engine, so they're a little bit longer. So it's very hard to get anything mixed up. You shouldn't have too much trouble keeping everything in the proper place. Just make sure not to lose any of the bolts. I'm now going to take off the oil filter and this oil filter housing, and that's going to be held on by these 3 12 millimeter bolts and then 2 12 millimeter nuts, one of which you can't see, and they're threaded onto these studs right here. Now the only thing preventing us from removing the timing cover is going to be the valve covers, so we're going to remove those now. This would also be a good time to replace the O-rings on both your cam sensors and your VVT actuators if they haven't been changed in a while. And there's also an O-ring that goes around this coolant pipe that might be good to replace. The valve covers, they're both basically the same and pretty straightforward. So there's going to be 3 10 millimeters going along the middle here, and then basically just removing all of these bolts along the outside will allow you to get it off. And then there's one bracket right here for the passenger side valve cover. The valve cover over here is basically the same. You don't have to remove this oil fill neck right here. There's a bracket right here for the fuel lines. There's another one down there. So just remove those 2 brackets, take off all the bolts along the outside, and you should be good to go. Both of those valve covers off. The total amount of hardware was 7 short bolts going along the outsides, 2 nuts holding it down on studs like these, and then 3 longer bolts going through the middle. So there's 12 pieces in total. Coming to the top of the engine, we need to get this fuel rail as well as these injectors out. And I'm actually going to disconnect these fuel lines right here to get them out of the way, just because it's, I mean, you could disconnect them in the back right there, but it's much better for space just to take them off right there. So that's going to be a bunch of 10 millimeter bolts. It looks like 3 on each side, and then it'll pull right out. Now that the lines and the rail and the injectors are removed, I'm going to talk a little bit about that process. So after you undo the 6 10 millimeter bolts, you're just going to want to pull that whole thing up. All the injectors will come out of their holes. And then if you want to kind of empty the line, maybe you could pull an injector out, have something there to catch the fuel, or just soak it up with a rag. It didn't spray anywhere for me. It just kind of poured out of the lines. And then to take these lines off, you'll come over here, and then there are these plastic clips that are covering the connectors. And there's a bigger one. This is the bigger one that goes on this this is the bigger line. It goes on this bigger line, which I believe feeds the fuel, and then there's the smaller line, which, if I'm not wrong, is the return line. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, you'll take, let me see, where is it? Here's a bag with the things that I used. I can't find the exact one that I used. I put it on the ground over here. So here it is. It's this 3/8 size piece, and what you do is you just wrap it around this line here, and you'll push it onto the line. So there's like a slot cut out for you to actually push it onto the line, and then once it's on there, you push it up inside of the connector, and then this collar right here will push out on the things that are locking it to this line, and then you basically just pull the line off. And so for this return line, none of the fuel, no fuel came out or spilled anywhere, but for this line, there was some fuel that came out and spilled, so you just be prepared for that. Here's this intake piece off of the car. I figured it would be a little easier to show you what it looked like. So these are all the bolts that you want to take out. These ones with this regular torx opening there. I'm not sure how many of them there are, but they go all around the intake. And then these ones right here, which I made the mistake of taking out, these security torx ones, you do not want to take those out. They're not holding this to the engine. They're just holding this upper piece to this lower piece, which even though I took all of them out, these are still held together. So I don't know why these are needed. But just do not make the mistake of taking those out. Only take these out. And then these bolts right here are for the fuel injector rail, and then these are for that upper plastic intake piece. Now for this coolant hose, it's connected, each of these hoses are connected, the bigger and the smaller one. And there's a 10 millimeter bolt down there. And then there's another one back here. You can see it down in there. So there's one bolt on each bank, and then this hose goes into this, I guess, kind of distributor right here. There's an O-ring going around it, and then this hose, the smaller one, runs along and connects to this heater core hose right here. And then the other heater core hose connects to this back distributing piece. And then that's held on with a 10 millimeter bolt on the bracket. So it's pretty much impossible to get a good camera angle back there, but from feeling around on the back of that piece, there appear to be 6 10 millimeter nuts holding it on in total. So it connects to each cylinder head. So 6 divided by 2, there's 3 bolts on each side. So just get your wrench back there, get them off, and it should come off. And then take the, I don't know if you have to take the hoses off. You could probably just let that piece dangle there, because you just have to get it out of the way to get the cylinder head off. But if you want to get it off entirely, you'll have to remove the heater core hoses as well. And then there's a wiring bracket on the back, on the underside, which mine just kind of disintegrated, but you might need a needle nose to get it out. And much earlier in the job, I removed one of the grounds that was on this cylinder head, but now there are also 2 right here, both held on by 10 millimeters that will need to be removed. So as you can see, the back coolant passage has been removed, but the hose is still there, and that's because I could not find a way to actually remove it. So I think it's going to be fine to just leave it in there until I start unbolting the heads, and then when I take one side out, I can just pick it up and remove it. And the reason for that difficulty is that there's a wire, first of all, there's a wire that runs under here for the NOx sensors, and there's some clips that clip it to this hose. And then there's also, for that outlet right there, there's a bracket attaching that to either the top of the transmission or the bottom of the cylinder head. I'm not sure which. I think it's the transmission, but it's a 10 millimeter bolt, and then there are 2 wires that are clipped into that. So you unbolt it, unclip the 2 wires, which was very painstaking, and then this is free to move. All I have to do is unclip the wires that are attached to it, and then it'll be completely free. And here's this coolant distributor itself. It uses 2 metal gaskets that you might want to replace. As you can see, there's 6 bolt holes holding it on. So that's going to be 2 bolts, one here and one here, and then 4 nuts around the sides of it. And then there is an O-ring similar to the front of this hose that holds it in right there. And so the difficulty with getting this out is not unbolting it, but once you have it unbolted, you actually have to push it backwards because you can't pull this hose out. And so I was basically standing, like, I had my feet, you know, right here inside of the inside of the engine bay, and I was just pushing it while trying to pull the hose out. And because it's a rubber O-ring, it's kind of friction locked in there, so it was a lot of twisting and pushing and turning, and it took a while, but it is out. I'm gonna start working on the exhaust, and all I have to do is take the manifold off. I'm not going to unbolt it from the rest of the exhaust. I'm just gonna kind of leave it hanging, see if I can move it off to the side, see if that's possible. But there are 6 nuts holding it on, 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom. And then there's also a bracket much further back in there. If you get under the car, you can see it much easier, but it's connected to the transmission. I'm gonna start with these 6 nuts, see how much I can move it, and then just keep unbolting as I go until I can get it free of the cylinder head. I'm gonna unbolt part of the exhaust under the car just to give those manifolds enough play to get them off of the cylinder heads. So that's gonna consist of 2 14mm bolts right here. And this is on the driver's side of the car. And then there's this bracket right here, which you could remove this bolt, but given how rusty that is, I'm not even sure that's gonna come out. So I'm gonna remove the bolts up here that are attached to the engine. You can't really see them, but it's 2 14mm, one on top of the other. And they're screwed into the transmission. So hopefully it'll just be those 4 bolts on the driver's side, and then the manifolds should come out. And I'm wearing safety glasses just because of any rust or dirt that might fall in my eyes. An hour and a half later, I got the last exhaust nut off. Here's what's left of it. So the sockets weren't getting it off, and eventually stripped the head. And then I tried a set of extractor sockets. Those didn't work, just kept stripping it. Tried the vice grips, that didn't work either. I tried removing the stud itself because there's a, you can put an e-torx bit on it. And as soon as I turned it, it just broke the head of the stud off because it was so rusty. So eventually I just said, screw it. Broke out my Dremel and just started hacking away at this thing. And eventually I cut a slot out and stuck a pry bar in here and just started hammering away on that pry bar until it widened it up enough to where it could just fall right off. And so I just got it off just now. And it would have been a lot easier if it was one of the top nuts, but it wasn't. It was under the exhaust, so I had to reach my hand up in there, reach the Dremel up in there, kind of fish the pry bar up in there. So it was overall not very fun at all, and hopefully this doesn't happen to you. Last thing I'm going to do for today is to remove the front timing cover. So let's get a look at all the bolts we're going to need to remove to get it off. So you've got 5 12mm right here at this top, and then there's 2 10mm right there, and then you have a 12mm right here. You have one up here in this corner, one right here, coming down. There's one right here. There's one right here. There's one right here. One right here. Let's see. There's a nut right there. There's another nut right there. There's 2 12mm right there. And that should be it, I believe, for this front section. And then there are a few oil pan bolts down here that you can't see, but you're gonna have to get under the car to remove those, or you can just hold your wrench upside down, whatever works for you. I forgot to mention there's a 12mm bolt right here. Once you have all the bolts for the timing cover off, you're going to want to take a pry bar. Screwdriver probably won't work just because it's really stuck on there with all the silicone. There's a lot of silicone holding this thing on. And I like to stick a pry bar right in here. Be careful not to damage the crankshaft position sensor right there. But right in here, it's 2 metal surfaces, and you can easily get a pry bar in there and just start prying it off. And once you get it off, in one place, you can kind of work your way around prying it off in other areas. And if it's not coming off, you probably don't have all the bolts out of it yet. So just take your time, look around, make sure you got them all out, and don't forget the bolts in the oil pan as well. These are all the bolts that I took off of the timing cover to remove it. So there are 4 oil pan bolts, 2 shorter ones, 2 longer ones. Very easy to see where they go. There's those 2 10mm that I showed before. There are 6 of these long bolts. It's pretty easy to see where they'll go, because if you try to put the short bolts into those holes, they won't fit, so you have to use the long ones. There are 2 nuts. One of them came off with the stud, but that's just a nut. And then the rest are just these short bolts right here. So I would just say remember where the long bolts go in, and then it's pretty easy to remember that the rest of them will just be short bolts. With the timing cover removed, the front of the engine is going to look something like this. As you can see, my timing chain has actually been replaced recently, along with the sprockets and the tensioner. So we're going to have to remove all of that, as well as the sprockets, to access the camshafts, to remove them, to then get the heads off. So it might look a little intimidating, but it's not that difficult, so I'm going to show you how to do it. First thing I'm going to do is remove this tensioner right here. So it's just these 2 10mm bolts, and it'll come off, and it'll probably pop out a little bit when you take it off. And then I'm going to remove this guide right here, and that's not held in by any bolts, so you can just slide it off once you get the tensioner off. All right, I got that off. And before you remove it, make sure to put a pick or some kind of even like a thumbtack in this little hole right here, because it'll stop it from popping out. But even if you don't have anything and it does pop out, it's all right. You can push it back in. I'll actually show you how to do that. So that was it popping out just now. And then you can see that, oh no, it's not going in. But then if you pull back on this part at the bottom, it'll go in. So it's this part right here, and you're pushing back on it all the way. While that other guide wasn't held in by any bolts, this one is held in by 2 12mm. So I'm going to take those off now. Those 2 guides out of the way, it should be loose enough to take these off. There's nothing holding them in. You just pull them off like that. If it's not loose enough, you can pull up right here, and it'll skip a tooth over here, and then you can move it out of the way like that. And also for these sprockets, when you try to take it off, it's going to want to turn the camshaft. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an adjustable wrench, put it right here, so I can hold the camshaft in place. And I'm not going to use any power tools, just because with the chain here and everything, I don't want to start buzzing away at it and just potentially damage something. So I'm just going to use an adjustable wrench and a ratchet and take it nice and slow. I was able to get the timing chain and sprockets off. A little bit about that. So once you loosen up the timing chain enough, you should be able to get it out from under the bottom of this sprocket, and this will actually just slide right off. Or what I did was I pushed it over and back, and then slid the sprocket off. And then once you can get the chain over the crankshaft, that'll loosen it up a bunch. You can basically just take the whole thing off at that point. And then you have to remember there are actually 3 chains that go to this. So there's a chain connecting everything together, and then there's a chain connecting the intake cam to the exhaust cam, and then there's another one on this side connecting those 2 camshafts. And so once you get the big chain off, those will actually just kind of slide right off. And then there's a tensioner that goes right here, and it's held in by a 12mm bolt. And you're gonna have to take that off. And I just kind of took all of that off together. So tensioner, chain, and sprockets, just two-handed it, took all of them off at once. And then we come over here to see these chains. And then, so yeah, this is what it looks like. There's the big and small sprocket. That's how they came off. And then these tensioners right here, there's no mechanism to keep them pressed in, because you can just press them in like that, because they actually use oil pressure to stay pressed out. So that's the hole right there where the oil goes through. And this sprocket right here is held on by a hex bolt. I'm assuming, but I'm not gonna bother to take that off, mostly because I don't have a hex head of that size, I don't think. So I'm just gonna leave that on there, and it's not essential to replace or remove. Now we're going to take the camshafts out, and it's very easy to keep everything together. They make it very simple for you, because as you can see on the top here, it says I1L. So you can probably guess that means intake cam, left side, cap number 1. And then you come back and it says, surprise, surprise, I2, and then I3 and I4. And then for this one, E1, E2, E3, and E4. So it's really easy to keep these lined up. And then as you can very well imagine, on the other side, it's IR1, and then I2, I3, I4. So you shouldn't have much trouble keeping everything in the right place. And the loosening sequence that I found was actually, you start at the back cam. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, coming to the front, 7, 8. So that is the proper loosening sequence according to the manual. And you don't want to take out each bolt completely before you move on to the next one. You want to loosen them in steps. So I'll probably just do like 3 steps where I crack it loose, and then loosen a few more turns, and so on and so forth until we've got it out. So let's see how that goes. They're going to require 10 millimeters on the smaller caps and then 12 millimeters on these large front caps. That first camshaft is out. This is the intake on the driver's side bank, and it didn't break, so that's good. And I also forgot to mention that for these caps, there are arrows on them, which you probably saw in the last video. And these arrows, and there's arrows on these smaller ones as well. And these arrows will point toward the front of the car. So just make sure that they're all, again, pointing in the correct direction when you reinstall them. And also, if your camshaft somehow has pressure on it from the valves, just get that adjustable wrench and turn it until there's no pressure from the valves while you're taking it off. If you don't want it to like pop out or something. I don't even know what could happen, but just better to avoid that scenario. All right, now for the moment of truth, I'm gonna remove the first cylinder head. This is on the driver's side. I still have to get the exhaust manifold completely off on the other side, but I just figured I'd go ahead and take this one out, give me a little bit more room to work on the other one. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do for this side, and the other side doesn't have these, but it's these 12 millimeter bolts right here, and you just wanna remove this one and then this one. And yeah, those are actually holding the head down. And then you have the main bolts here, and I'll tell you what size that socket is in a minute, but the order you're gonna wanna do this is you'll start with this one up here, go across to this one in the back, over to here, up here, over now in the middle, up, down, up. So you're kind of just working from outside to in. And just like the camshafts, just do this step by step, loosen each bolt a little bit, and then just work your way around. And here's the socket that I got. It's an M12. And I actually got this on a Toyota shop for pretty cheap. All right, the cylinder head is off. It wasn't terribly difficult. I just loosened the bolts in kind of like 3 steps. So I did a quarter turn on each of them, then came back through with another quarter turn. And by that point, they were pretty loose, so I was able to loosen them all the way. Now we're on to the next cylinder head. And before you want to start removing the bolts, there's actually a cam cap that was resting right here. I removed it, but it's covering up this bolt right here. So what you have to do is take a screwdriver and just very light taps on the lip on the outside, and mine came off no problem. I didn't damage it or anything. And then you also have to pull the VVT sensor out of the way, because if I push it in, you can see that it actually will block that bolt, so you have to pull it out. And then the order is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So the exact same as the other cylinder head. All right, the second head is off. So that probably concludes the disassembly process of this repair. And I'm gonna take a break for today, but when I come back tomorrow, I'm gonna start by vacuuming out this middle section here. There's a bunch of kind of sand and dirt and all kinds of crud up in there that can be vacuumed out. And I don't know what I'm smelling here, but it might be something with the head or something, but it actually smells like someone emptied a porta potty in here. It's just disgusting. So I'm gonna stop for today, and we'll see what tomorrow has in store. Now, before I reinstall the head, I'm gonna replace the valve stem seals, which I wasn't originally planning to do, but I saw that there was oil in the exhaust ports, which could just be from the bad head gasket, or potentially oil getting around the piston and into the combustion chamber from bad compression. But it could also be from it leaking through the valve and into the ports. So while the head's out, I'm just gonna do that right now, just kind of covering my bases. And I've already removed the first one, and as you can see, it is pretty brittle. I mean, the rubber is very stiff, so I don't think this was doing a very good job of sealing. There are 6 valves per camshaft, so that's going to be 12 per head, 24 in total, and the intake and the exhaust valves are different, so there's different part numbers for each, and you don't want to mix those up. To actually get the valve out, the first thing you're going to want to do is to take this bucket off, and that'll expose the valve retainer. And then there are plenty of different tools to do this, and there's another method that I'll explain in a second, but I got this tool just because it seemed to be the most suitable for this cylinder head. And so this part of it right here will press on the top of the cap, so it'll go around here, and then this part of it will press on the valve, so it'll press on this part of the valve and hold it in place, and then you use the handle to crank down on it, and then it'll press inward, so it'll squeeze the spring, and then with the valve held in place, it'll press this cap downward, and then there are 2 small retainers right here that will either fall out, or you can take them out with a magnet or some kind of pick. And the way they go back in is the wider side will face upwards, whereas the narrower side will face downwards. But then the whole thing will come out, and then you push the valve out through the bottom of the head, and then you can use a needle nose or some kind of screwdriver or pick to remove the valve stem seal. And another method that I saw to remove it was to take a socket, the diameter of this cap, with a extension, and you just like hammer on the cap while keeping the valve in place, and then those retainers will fall out. But I'm not going to do it that way. I just think this tool does the job a little better, just in my personal opinion. And then you will actually need a tool to reinstall them. So you can use, you don't need the tool to get them out, but you will need it to put them back in. And how you'll do that is with this window right here in this thing that presses on the retainer, you will press it down, and then through this window insert those little pieces into either side of the valve, and then let the pressure off, and it should be properly secured. And that seems to be the hardest part of the job, just lining up those pieces. So we'll see how that goes. And with this, you don't want to mix up the hardware, so I wouldn't want to put this one back here. So I'm just gonna try to keep everything together. I'm gonna do one valve at a time, so I'm just gonna finish each valve before I take apart another one, just to keep everything organized. All right, 2 valves are in there. It's gonna look something like that. And really all there is to it is you oil up the seal, press it in, and just press it in until it doesn't press any further. It won't, like if you look down back in here when you put the seal in, it won't be flush against the bottom, so there'll be a little gap in there. So you don't want to push it any further than that and potentially break the seal. And then when you're pushing these back in, again, using this tool, I was able to clamp down on it, and I had this part facing up and this part facing down, and I put one finger in through the top, one finger through the bottom, and was just kind of holding these keepers. And it's really meticulous. It's kind of hard to do to line them up, but eventually I was able to put each one in there and then release the pressure and get it to seat properly. So yeah, now let's move on to the rest. And again, I have to stress, do not mix up these buckets, don't mix up the springs, the valves, anything. Just put it back exactly the way you took it out. So here's an example. This is on the exhaust side with this tool installed. You can see it's putting pressure on the valve, and so that keeper actually just fell out of place. And so we're gonna remove that and then remove the other one on the top right there. And with this tool like this, it'll actually stay closed without you having to put pressure on it when it's all the way closed. And so it doesn't really matter for taking the valves out, but for reinstalling them, it's very helpful. And then you can see in that window there, that's where you'll put, you know, your fingers or your needle nose or whatever you're going to use to install those keepers to put them back into place. And then here, I'll just take them out right now. And then you will pull back, and then you can see I just released it, and then the valve spring, you will pull that out, and then the valve will push out the other side like that. And there's a bit of resistance, it's very stuck, so I recommend twisting it, and then eventually you'll be able to pull it out. I've also gone and replaced the exhaust studs, at least the worst looking ones. I would have done all of them, but this was all the dealership had on hand, so it's better than nothing. And the way to remove them, you're probably not going to want to use this part that an e-torx bit can fit over, because if it's rusty, it'll probably break. So you can either use the nut method where you screw two nuts on, lock them together, and then turn the lower one, and it'll function kind of like the head of a bolt. Or you can just use the vice grips and go to town on it, but I'm not sure if that will work. It worked for me at least, but to reinstall them, it's actually a lot easier. You can use an e-torx, I think it's an E8 bit, and I wasn't following any torque spec for this. I just turned them to what I felt was the proper tightness. They don't have to be super tight, so it was very easy to reinstall them. I'm now going to go about reinstalling the cylinder heads on the car. So the first thing I'm going to do is clean off any of this material right here. I'm also going to try to get as much oil out of these passages as I can, because when you put it on, oil is going to be leaking out of here, and you don't want it to get on the head gasket and contaminate the sealing surface. So you just want it to be super dry and super clean. And then if you come over to the engine itself, as you can see, there's a little bit of fluid in that cylinder, in that sixth cylinder. So I'm going to clean that out. I'm just going to clean the surface off. You can use a plastic razor blade, maybe a metal razor blade if you're very careful. You just want to make sure it's good and clean, and not to leave really any debris in the combustion chambers or in the surrounding cooling passages.